Moses led the people across the Red Sea. Joshua led the people across. Oh, my mom's calling me. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back again to another episode of RAWTHENIC RADIO with Eric and Rylie. It is a joy to be with you guys again. Tonight, we're talking about a topic that is very, very, it's been something that's been talked about a lot to us both recently. It's called, basically what we want to do today is bridge the gap between generations. And we're calling it what are we calling it? Boomerlennial relationships. And it's not just for boomers and millennials. We just happen to be in those generations. But,
I'm a boomer, by the way, in case you're confused.
Yes. But basically, I'm the millennial. He's not the millennial. But basically, just the gift that actually comes if the generations were to communicate together and have relationship together. And it was spurred on by you guys.
Tell them what happened on the street the other day.
Yeah. So I'm walking into a coffee shop and I hear my name and I turn around and it's this lady that I've never met before. And she says, Rylie, I've been watching Rawthentic podcast. And I would say she's probably listening. So I'm going to say she was like 37.
Well, she was a little closer to my age, maybe, than that.
I'm going to say she's probably upper 40s, 50s. And anyway, she goes, hey, I just want to say thank you guys so much for doing this show. She says that she's been leading a small group for young adults with millennial girls. And the way that we interact together, the way that we have conversation has actually given her tools to help lead her girls. Right. And it helped her basically walk in a vulnerability with the girls that she's leading that otherwise she would not have been able to. And she's been able to connect with them on a whole new level. And so this is really spurred on by that conversation. And there's so many different people who have brought up, like, how can the generations interact?
Well, and Rylie had that experience. And then the next experience, I go to a conference in Texas called Kingdom Reformers. And when I get there, a young woman named Donna Davenport, who's fairly close to my age, comes up and goes, Eric, I want to know what you're doing. And I want to talk about mentoring, because I want to know what you're doing. Because as I'm watching Rawthentic and I'm seeing how you and Rylie relate, I'm realizing I need to do things differently in the young adult millennial group that I lead. And I'm super excited. So before I left, I gave her a bunch of my tools that I use in life coaching, which she can use with them. But then we're also supposed to connect, I think this week or next, just to talk about how I can share with her what I've learned so far.
Well, and it is such a gift if we were to come together as generations and learn from one another.
Yeah. And
so that's what we're going to talk about today. But Eric, why do you feel like the generations don't connect? Like, what's the gap there to why boomers can't relate or connect with millennials?
It's like everything else in connection. It's all about communication. And there's different things that my generation as boomers believe that actually make it challenging for us, because our perspective comes from a completely different era than what you guys experience.
Yeah. And I think what we're striving for is different than what you're striving for at this point in your life.
Right.
So the boomers, and you made this note, and I think it's so true. The people in their 50s and 60s,
right?
The boomers are worried about legacy. They're trying to, what are they going to leave? The millennials are thinking about purpose. what am I going to find? What am I going to do? And so millennials are worried about making a mark, while the boomers are worried about leaving a mark. And we think these things are separate, but they actually, if they would come together, it could be a powerful force for change for the kingdom.
Well, what I find very fulfilling, I've actually had some pretty major successes and some colossal failures as well. And so it's very fulfilling to me to hand the wisdom that I've gained from both of those, just to hand that off to millennials and actually see some of them skip 20 years of wandering around trying to figure stuff out because they don't have that information.
And that is super powerful. And that's why our relationship has affected me in such a positive way, because I've been able to learn by wisdom what you've had to learn by experience.
Right. And probably like a year ago, I think, shortly after we had the conversation about being known and learning to be known on such a personal level, you said, I'm taking notes from your life so that I don't have to learn some of the things that you've learned through your experiences.
Yeah.
And when you said that to me, that actually helped me come to a commitment point with you where I tell you things, even I went to a level of being known I wasn't even totally comfortable with because it felt super awkward.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're going to pay that much attention to the wisdom I've learned through some awesome things, but also just some extremely painful things, then let me make sure that you can read in all caps. So let me not hide out and not reveal what I'm continuing to learn, because at my age now, I'm thinking through a lot of things in my life, and I'm really looking at the next 20 years, or I'm actually looking at the next 40.
Yeah.
But, what do I want to do? And I think that's also part of what has helped me stop hiding out and not speaking up about the things that I've learned in my own life. What we're doing is not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
But there are some people who are looking for what are some answers that you've gained thus far. So I want to leave an inheritance.
And there's people that are hungry for that.
Yeah.
In the millennial age group and in the boomer age group and in between.
Right.
And I think what's affected me has been, I remember sitting across from you and saying, Rylie, you have an opportunity now to learn at 29 what took me to learn at 60.
Right.
And that hooked me. And I just wonder how many people are out there that this same experience, the same reality could become your ammunition.
Right.
Like it could affect other people if they would just humble themselves.
On both sides.
Millennials humble themselves and realize there's something that I can learn from the generation before me. And similarly for the boomers. And I think
for boomers, for us to humble ourselves, it's to face the insecurities, because your generation is so blunt and so rude, if you will, which means you say what you think, that you guys can really be intimidating.
Yeah. Well, but there's a reason for that too. And that's what we want to get, because we have insecurities too. Our insecurities are like, man, are these people am I going to be understood? Yeah. And let me just say this, we need to change the language around how the generations interact. What I mean by that is, being around the church and being around a lot of men in the boomer generation, there's almost this, from what I sense, a disgust, because I was a young adult pastor. So they would come to me with just so many worries and concerns about what are we going to do about the millennials? And
you're talking about boomers.
Boomers.
Okay.
Boomers would come to me and ask, what are we going to do about these millennials? I mean, they're wearing tight jeans, holes in their kneecaps. But they're genuinely concerned, right?
Right.
But I feel like part of the issue is that the language, the rhetoric around how boomers feel about millennials builds this wall where we go, they're never going to understand me.
Well, and recently in the last year, you spoke at a church about this very topic.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because we went around the table. I sat at my dad's table. So there were 8 guys.
Yeah.
Most of them 70 and up. And I purposely went last. It was hilarious.
because you guys were talking about generations.
Yeah. We were talking about generations, and they were talking about, what do you think about the millennials?
Wow.
And they were like, they're rude. They're really direct. They don't seem to have any respect for older generations. They feel entitled. They're not very focused. And so I sat there while everybody else did it. And then I said, wow, I actually have a very different perspective on the millennials. And I just kind of punched holes in with my little ice pick of truth.
Wow.
Of all the things that they said, because I said, when you're talking to a millennial, you actually get the real deal.
Yeah.
If you'll make them feel safe enough to talk to you.
Yes. And that's something you do and walk that that's a spot or space that few boomers will go to.
It's very frightening to do it sometimes though.
Why?
Because my generation, we worked really hard. I've worked since I was really 12 years old, and I was roughnecking in the oil field at 16. So, when I listen to boomers and they're like, I don't know, I just don't have a passion for that. I'm like, you have bills, go to work.
You mean millennials?
Millennials, not
millennials say, I don't have a passion for that.
Right. You don't have a passion for what? Do you like to eat? That's, that was a first response to that.
Yeah. Which is real.
It is real. But it's also, I came to respect the fact that some of them, they could land a great job, but no, they want to go to Europe for the summer and hike around with their backpack, almost no money, happy as a clam, come home with all these ideas they got.
Yeah.
I never had the courage to do that.
Well, let's talk about that though, because what I think is fascinating, and it's so like God, that where the boomer generation is strong, the millennials are weak. Yeah. Where the boomer generation is weak, the millennials are strong.
Yeah.
So the beauty in it all is that if we could walk across a room and get into some relationship,
just have a conversation
and learn and understand somebody's story and take some of the stuff that we're giving each other, dude, the church would be a force to be reckoned with. And I would even say that maybe the coming revival is waiting on that.
Oh, that could be.
I would go as far to say that the coming revival may be waiting on our generations to have relationship together. And
I actually think the revival won't wait, but if you want to be a part of it, because I listen to people.
That's good.
Everybody, there is such an expectancy in our country and really around the world about a revival. And it's so interesting to me because some of the people that, pound the pulpit and talk about revival and all these things that you have to do, I just listen to them and the box that they live in and the box that God can actually move in and the people that he can move through. That box is so small and that people group is so small.
Yeah.
It's like, you think a revival is going to be that small?
Yeah.
I think God's going to really use some people that are going to shock a bunch of us.
Multi-generational, multi-ethnic, different language, all of this stuff that's biblical. And, But where the boomers are strong, we're weak. Where they're weak, we're strong. And so if we come together, man, these things a cord of 3 strands that the Bible says is not easily broken. And I just think like we are terrible at focus. We have 30 different things going on at once. We can't figure out how to make a decision for the life of us.
Nobody wants to actually pick a career because then I would have to commit to something.
Well, and we're afraid of commitment. Yeah. On the other hand, man, the boomers are committed. If they will.
I've worked hard all my life and I'm going to work. I don't even know if I'm going to retire.
And it's like, it doesn't, but on the flip side, there's an aspect of fun, excitement, that is missing.
Now.
No, I'm talking about from boomers. There's an aspect of fun and excitement missing from your life.
Yeah.
And you've built some incredible things, but in the, like, thrown to the wayside is relationship.
Yeah.
And even yourself. And so what would it look like if you taught me focus and you taught me, hey, let's narrow it down and look at what's important. But I was able to teach you, like, hey, we can narrow it down, look at what's important, but let's have a blast doing it.
Yeah.
Like, let's go to coffee and, I don't know, go on some adventure. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying? Like, if we were to come together, what could happen?
Yeah. It'd be really powerful. I also think it'd be super powerful for boomers to sit down and really just evaluate their lives. Because so many of us, we get to what's you begin to understand is your, I don't even know what to call it, your latter years.
Yeah.
And we have regrets, or we look back at things that we wish we had done differently. It's really powerful to sit down and think those things through.
Yeah.
And then pick out just one young adult and just share, like, just through questions and conversation. And we can talk about some of those practical questions, because a lot of people, that's actually the most frightening part about getting together is what
do
would
we
I
talk
say?
about?
Yeah. What would we have in common?
Yeah. And so let's go into this. I would like to know, what do you feel like boomers would need from millennials for a connection to be easier or possible?
Probably one thing would just be to show some interest. Because I think we can feel probably pretty intimidating sometimes and look more put together than we actually are. Because really, unless you are a petrified Christian, which means wood that turned to stone, you're still growing as a believer.
Yeah.
So I think if a millennial just showed some interest, or even had the courage to ask one of us, hey, would you be willing to go to coffee?
Yeah.
I think that would be meaningful. I think just to ask questions, simple questions like, what's the thing that you're most proud of? How did you accomplish that?
Yeah.
Even just initial questions like, where are you originally from?
Yeah.
You know, what was your family like growing up?
So it's like a date.
Yeah. It's like any relationship.
Date a boomer.
Yeah.
But honestly, no, you're right. And I would say we don't do a great job at showing interest. And I even think about it like walking into a church lobby, you can see the divide.
Yeah.
The millennials, or, you know, even the Generation Z walking through, it's almost like there's few, the relationships between them and boomers other than their parents are few and far between. And I think part of it is we look at you and what we see is you're workers. Like, you got your khakis on, brown belt, shirt tucked in. You look at church like you look going to your 9 to 5. You know what I mean? And we always,
it's a responsibility.
Yeah. We just look, I think, and it's wrong.
To you guys, it's an experience. To us, it's a responsibility.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And so I just think there's this misnomer that, like, man, there's just this, all they do is work. And here's what I'll say. What we need from you, and this is probably easier said than done. What we need from you is this whole idea that I would, it's easier for me to connect with your vulnerability than I'll ever connect with your ability.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, I think at times what we get from the generations before us is all your successes. Here's 3 steps to build this. Here's what we've done to get to where we're at. And it's like, oh, that's great. Okay. But, like, where'd you screw up? Tell me, be vulnerable with me. Tell me some of the mistakes that you made.
Tell me some of the things I can learn so I can avoid, even if they know our lives, sometimes they know some of our debacles.
Yeah.
But that's the last thing we want to talk about. How could I avoid that?
Because we're all about being real. That's right. One thing about us that's known. We're about being real. And so I think we get the impression at times that we're not going to get that from boomers. or from generations before us. It's just not going to happen. So it's like, why waste your time? I don't need 7 steps to build a successful anything. Like, I want to know the nitty gritty. I want to know what you walk through. I want to know like your life.
I think if you're actually going to have a boomer millennial relationship, you're going to have to step outside of the religious box that church has relationships between the generations in. Because we recently even had someone respond to a statement I made in the past, which was spiritual fathers can actually father young women. And they were like,
that's what you said.
That's what I said. And the response was, that's just so inappropriate.
Yeah.
Totally understand where that comes from. But in the church, there are so many fatherless young women. Please tell me that we have men my age and women that they're either married to or in relationship with, who have enough integrity where those young women can pull on the father heart that's in some of those guys, because they don't have a father to do that. You're going to have to step outside of boxes in the church, because we're always on different sides of the church.
Yep.
We're probably closer to the front. Y'all are, sitting separately. Yeah. And we're going to have to step outside of those boxes and this is how we've always done it mentality to actually be able to leave the inheritance that we slowly, as we're getting to this age, we slowly come to realize, oh my gosh, I want to actually know that I left a mark on the world, even if it's one person.
Yeah. And if boomers are in that legacy season where they're saying, I want to leave something behind, what you're going to leave behind isn't a 401k. It's not an estate. That's not what's going to matter. What's going to matter is the people you built, the lives you poured into, the connections that you made. That's where legacy happens. Right. And so if I think about anybody who's made impact on my life, my grandpa just passed away. Powerful, incredible man of God, was a pastor for years. I think 57 years. No, over that. I'll get the number later. But has done all of these great things. You know what I'm not thinking about? How many churches he preached at. I'm not thinking about the financial anything that he left. I'm thinking about the relationship I had with him. Yeah. I'm thinking about, wow, look at all the people he impacted. That's legacy. Yeah. That's what we're talking about, is the opportunity that we have if we'll just kind of each generation humble ourselves and get to this place where I realize I can learn from you. Yeah. In some ways, you realize you can learn from us.
Absolutely. I think there's so much life that we can open up to, because people my age, some of our raising our children has not gone well.
Yeah.
Some of our marriages haven't worked out like we thought. And there's still time to actually share wisdom.
Yeah.
And invest in someone and make a true difference.
Yeah.
My dad I was probably 45 when my father said to me one day, because I always had such an emphasis on relationships. And he said to me one day, he grew up very poor.
Yeah.
So he was very intent on leaving an inheritance for us kids.
Yeah.
And for building an estate, which was a powerful thing for him to be committed to. But he said, I have realized, I think you've had it right all along. And I had no grid for the conversation by then, because he always kind of poked fun at me.
Yeah.
For my priorities. He said, I'm not going to have a U-Haul with a bunch of money in it behind my hearse. Mm. He said, what you've invested your life in really matters.
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you're a boomer, I just want to encourage you to, come that direction.
Yeah. And I would just encourage this if you do end up having the courage to have these conversations and to build a relationship, I think it's important, especially for the millennials, you got to lead with curiosity.
Yeah.
Come into
show interest, have questions.
Come in like you don't have everything figured out, because newsflash, you don't.
Oh, and I think that's an important thing for the boomers to actually relax.
Yes.
Because your generation looks at my generation, and it's sometimes even a lot of times leaders in ministry, and my generation is so used to, I don't know if you know or not, but I am the senior pastor here. And and there's a certain air that we put off.
Yep.
That actually says we're not to be questioned. But millennials particularly look at us, my generation, and they're like, dude, you think I can't see your arrogance? You think I don't see your insecurities?
Yep.
By the way, those shoes look bad. You don't have any friends to tell you the truth.
Because when it comes down, we are real, and real recognizes real.
Yeah.
And so here's what you need to know about millennials. We don't care about the estate you're building. We don't care about all your victories. I want to know the real stuff. And so
what do you call the real stuff?
The real stuff is, where did you mess up? It's what I said earlier. Where did you mess up? What happened in your life to, yes, eventually get you to where you're at, or not only that, what's happening in your life right now? My man, that is big. What's happening in your life right now?
And for a lot of boomers, that makes us really insecure, because a lot of us are realizing we don't quite have as much figured out as we thought we did, regardless of what our asset list looks like.
Yeah.
And so that's a very intimidating question.
Yeah. And I think a second thing that millennials and probably boomers need to do is learn somebody's history. What I mean by that is, when it comes down to it, millennials, they think that we're entitled and things have come easy to us in life, because it has.
And you are.
And we are entitled. Like, I'll be the first to admit, like, man, if I learned and knew the history of, like, you started work at what age doing what?
12.
At 12.
16 in the oil fields.
And in the oil, like, to us, that sounds like
child labor. That's like abuse.
That's abuse. We would be calling somebody, like, authorities would be showing up, but that's real. Yeah. And so, man, there's something to that. And we've got to understand that, oh, wait, no, their perception of us might not be totally wrong. It's not the fullness of who we are. There's a lot more to us, but they're not wrong. Like, I have had it pretty easy, and I know that there's exceptions of people, but because you guys worked so hard, we didn't have to.
And as I look at so many of my younger friends, I'm like, if you want to be able to give your children some things, because they're not thinking that far ahead, because they were given so much. But newsflash, you can't be a barista at Starbucks and travel around forever. You got to let's start figuring out what's our skill set.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about passion, I understand now. I wish I had done things that I had more passion about as I was coming up. So let's figure out what your passion is, but where are you going? Because you're going to need a paycheck.
Yep. And man, there's so much that could come out of those conversations.
Yeah.
And, I even think I have an incredible relationship with my own dad, who is in the boomer generation. And Bob is the man. And it's just such a gift to my life. When I look back at what's made the biggest mark on my life that he's done, it hasn't been all the hours that he's worked, even though he's worked a lot. Yeah. Not even all the sacrifices he's made, and he's made a lot. What stands out to me and sticks out is the fact that there was a season where he began to shift, and he started to process through his pain openly in front of us. And that's something I'll never forget. And that's something that's changed my life. Isn't his 3-step, process to success. It's, hey son, here's what I've been battling. Here's the things, even going back into his childhood and the things that got him to, that caused him to go through some of the negative experiences he had. It was like eye-opening for me to understand, like, wow, like my dad's going to go there with me. That's something that can't be taken away.
Yeah.
And so I think, for the boomers, that's something that we're drawn to. Maybe as we close, do you have advice for the boomers that you'd give quickly before, like for some of these relationships are going to happen. What advice do you have?
I would just encourage boomers to realize that you actually have more than you think you do to offer.
So true.
And to have the courage to just step outside it's the cultural norms. It's all of our insecurities. Actually,
we dress so different.
It's horribly insecure. Sometimes I've felt that, to ask a millennial to go to coffee because you don't know what their response is going to be. But I've just done this now for a number of years, and there is such a powerful ROI, return on investment.
Yeah.
I have just seen so many young adult lives literally change the trajectory of their life because I had belief in them.
Yeah.
And because I told them my own life and the different choices I made, good and bad. And I just also then began to speak life into them.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot of men out there. There's few fathers.
Yeah.
And our generation's cry, we're a fatherless generation in many ways.
And a motherless generation, actually. And
what we need is some mothers and fathers in the kingdom to come and wrap their arms around us. And I think there's a lot of men and women in the boomer generation who are looking for purpose as well. Yeah. Like this awesome lady that stopped me at the coffee shop has found purpose in mentoring and really mothering some of these young women. And that's a part of God's heart for the kingdom. And if you're wondering, hey, where do I fit into the church today? Where do I grow? Like, where do I offer my skills and abilities? Because all the people up on stage now are in ripped jeans and are younger. I can't sing. I can't, play what I learned. We need fathers. We need mothers. And that's a reflection of the beauty of God. And Psalm 68 verse 5 says that God by nature is a father to the fatherless. He's a defender of widows. And then it says he sets the lonely in families.
Yeah.
And there are incredible men and women of God in your generation who God is wanting to rise up and set some lonely in families. And so if you're looking for purpose, step into that.
And that actually can go both ways, because the older you get, the more you begin to wonder, am I relevant? Is what I have to offer still, does it have meaning somewhere? And really it's just touching one life and seeing them begin to flourish just because one person believes in them.
Yeah. And my challenge to the millennials would be this: there would be no Joshua if there wasn't first a Moses. Notice scripture says that Moses led the people out of Egypt into the wilderness, and then Joshua picked up and led the people out of the wilderness into the promised land. Yeah. And there's something about that is, it's scriptural obviously, but it's so powerful that we will pick up where you left off. But Moses and Joshua lived a close-knit relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's also powerful to note that basically if Moses hadn't led the people out of slavery, or the fact that he did lead people out of slavery, that's the very road that we now walk in to lead people into promise. And it's just such a powerful understanding to realize that if Moses hadn't led people out of slavery, we would never have been able to walk into the promise. And the same is true in these generations. Like, there's so many freedoms that we have because you guys fought.
Yeah.
And if we could get a revelation of that it's not just a biblical truth, but because it's a biblical truth, it's also a reality in our life today, that there are things that your generation fought. There are Egypts that your generation left that gave us a foundation to stand on so that we could walk out into a promised land. And so if we could respect that in one another, if we could honor that in one another, that would be so powerful. Moses led the people across the Red Sea, and Joshua led the people across the Jordan. Like, Joshua is not able to do that unless Moses goes first. And it's because of Moses' victories that Joshua and Moses, his experiences became Joshua's wisdom. And so we need to humble ourselves as millennials and realize, man, there are things that the generations before us have that we desperately, desperately need. And then that's why God says to the Israel, hey, I want you to set up these stones as remembrance so that you will remember what the forefathers before you did. And if the millennials have a sin, it's the fact that we lost sight of the stones.
I think there's one other thing that comes to me, and that's a lot of times an elder, which is my age, or 50s, 60s, will be hesitant to approach a millennial because they don't want to do anything to appear to like be trying to take the place of someone's parents. And that's impossible to do.
Yeah.
No matter, I have a powerful position in some young adults' lives, but I can never take the place of anyone's biological mother or father as a parent.
Yeah.
Some people literally don't have that. And then some people have amazing parents, and I still have a deposit I can make in their life.
Yeah.
So I just encourage boomers just to not overthink if the Holy Spirit, because a lot of times I'm actually drawn to deposit in someone's life.
Yeah.
If the Holy Spirit draws you towards that, or you just see someone and you think, I really click with them, then be courageous and realize you're not going to overstep something.
Yeah.
You can't take a biological parent's place.
Totally.
But you have a powerful thing in the kingdom, much like Paul with Timothy. You can do something that will actually take them to a whole different level of living.
Yeah. And I don't know, man, there's something on it. If we can do this,
yes,
we would be such a powerful tool for each other.
Well, I think one of the reasons we're so committed to this is because we have done this.
We have.
And it's been so powerful on both sides.
Yeah.
And both of us have benefited so much. So we deeply believe in this.
And we want to offer that to you.
Yeah.
It's available.
Yep.
Walk across the room, start a conversation.
Yep.
It'll be a generational revival, not just one. Let's go get it. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great week. We love you. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out our podcast.
Yeah, we're not actually here to debate. We're just here to make you think.
Yep. We actually don't think we have all the answers, but we just love having the conversation. So do us a favor, hit subscribe. If you liked it, share it. Give us a like. If you didn't like it, no problem. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.